I have the pleasure today of introducing you to Lee Aitchison. Lee is one of our instructors. He teaches Biz 150 and among other things, but he is definitely the resident expert on sustainability and all things to do with it. Biz 261 is his course, which is where the whole course is devoted to sustainability and its issues. We asked him to come and introduce the topic to us here today. So with that, I'll just turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tim.
Welcome. Thank you for coming on the Friday before a long weekend. I know that's sometimes a tough audience to get, but I know as Tim pointed out, you're going to be, if you haven't already, you're starting to speak about corporate social responsibility, a little bit about sustainability in Biz 150, and you've also got your last assignment number 3, that's going to be integrating business practices and sustainability as sort of a common theme. So this is sort of a precursor to get you thinking about those things within the business 150 class, and then sort of leading towards that final project to give you a little taste about sustainability, sort of at the larger level. Well, I mean, the thing we're not going to be doing today, we won't be able to solve climate change, even though a lot of people think that it's probably one of the most significant issues that we're facing. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change just came out last week with another report that suggests we're in for more and freakish weather over the next little while. And even the American Climate Association suggests that we need to start feeding the polar bears up in the Arctic, because the ice flow is changing so much that they're not able to feed in the same way that they used to. But we'll leave those topics for deeper discussions perhaps in Biz 261. But what I do want to do is spend maybe the next 35 or 40 minutes dialing back to that 30,000 foot level, looking at some of the issues around sustainability, and then try to tie it back in for you to maybe some things you can think about in terms of actions or positive things as you say move through this class and move towards that last assignment as well. So I have 3 specific kind of goals that I hope, or takeaways that I hope you get from today's talk. The first one is to try to come up with at least my definition, or the definition that I use for sustainability, and perhaps you can share yours. What are your perspectives about what exactly sustainability is? I really want to look at, again, sort of examining the present state. I mean, where are we now relative to issues about sustainability? Are we sort of in a truly sustainable mode right now, or do we have a lot or a little bit of work to do? And then, as I said before, finish up with that notion of looking at a few of the the ways we're tackling sustainability right now, and a couple of examples of how we might, be able to, how others are at least trying to tackle some of the issues that we're facing. So I've teed up a bunch of slides and videos today, and I wanted to start with one from Australia. Just take a minute and watch this. We'll see if we can get it running here.
That's a great pleasure, thank you.
The ship that was involved in the incident off Western Australia this week.
Yeah, the one the front fell off?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not very typical. I'd like to make that point.
Well, how is it untypical?
Well, there are a lot of these ships going around the world all the time, and very seldom does anything like this happen. I just don't want people thinking that tankers aren't safe.
Was this tanker safe?
Well, I was thinking more about the other ones.
The ones that are safe?
Yeah, the ones the front doesn't fall off.
Well, if this wasn't safe, why did it have 80,000 tonnes of oil on it?
I'm not saying it wasn't safe, it's just perhaps not quite as safe as some of the other ones.
Why?
Well, some of them are built so the front doesn't fall off at all.
Well, wasn't this built so the front wouldn't fall
Well,
off?
obviously not.
How do you know?
Because the front fell off and 20,000 tonnes of crude oil spilled into the sea caught fire. It's a bit of a giveaway. I just like to make the point that that is not normal.
Well, what sort of standards are these oil tankers built to?
Oh, very rigorous maritime engineering standards.
What sort of thing?
Well, the front's not supposed to fall off for a start.
And what other things?
Well, there are regulations governing the materials that they can be made of.
What materials?
Well, cardboard's out.
And?
No cardboard derivatives.
Like paper?
No paper. No string, no sellotape.
Rubber?
No, rubber's out. They've got to have a steering wheel. There's a minimum crew requirement.
What's the minimum crew?
Oh, 1, I suppose.
So the allegation is that they're just designed to carry as much oil as possible. All the
ludicrous.
consequences, I mean, that's ludicrous.
Absolutely ludicrous. These are very, very strong vessels.
So what happened in this case?
Well, the front fell off in this case, by all means, but it's very unusual.
But Senator Collins, why did the front book fall off?
Well, a wave hit it.
A wave hit it?
A wave hit the ship.
Is that unusual?
Oh, yeah. At sea, chance for millions.
So what do you do to protect the environment in
Well,
cases like
the
this?
ship was towed outside the environment.
Into another environment?
No, it's been towed beyond the environment. It's not in the environment.
No, but from one environment to another environment.
No, it's beyond the environment. It's not in an environment. It has been towed beyond the environment.
Well, what's out there?
Nothing's out there.
Well, there must be something
There is nothing out there. All there is sea and birds and fish.
And
20,000 tonnes of crude oil.
what else?
And a fire.
And anything else?
And the part of the ship that the front fell off. But there's nothing else out there.
Senator Collins, thanks for
It's a
joining us.
complete void.
Yeah, we're out of
The
time.
environment's perfectly safe. We're out of time?
So, anyway, that actually is a parody, obviously here, but it is of a real incident that happened off of West Australia in 1991 when a tanker, the front part of a tanker fell off, and 20,000 tons of crude oil spilled into the ocean off West Australia. And I mean, we could probably spend the whole class sort of dissecting that and talking about the issues that are raised in that video. But I want to kind of focus on one statement that was made there, and it was that notion of that the ship was outside of the environment. You know, that the ship was towed away and outside of the environment, and there's actually nothing there. And I want to really start by asking a pretty simple question. You know, when we use the term, we're going to throw something away, and we use that term all the time, right? I'm just going to toss that away. Well, the question I want to ask you is, where is away? You know, where is that place that is away, right? We can look in Canada. We're very fortunate to have a pretty good garbage pickup system, and we often, you know, people come here and they go, wow, it's so clean here. You know, everything's really nice and neat. And we don't see images maybe like this, where you have, you know, a pristine lake and yet there's a garbage dump essentially right beside it. And so I think that a lot of times we are kind of, how can I put it? We're sort of divorced from the fact that we as well have issues around sustainability and around garbage. We're much better and much more efficient at fixing things and making them not in the public eye, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. And you go to other areas of the world that don't have the kind of systems that we have or the ability to do that, you end up with much more visual images that sort of, you know, connect the notion of, well, where is away? It might be not that far away, you know, that things are ending up. There are a lot of different definitions of sustainability. You know, we talk about it. Does anybody have one that they want to share? I have one that I am particularly fond of that I'm going to share with you, but I'd like to hear from others about what that might be.
To me, sustainability means to keep everything exactly the way it is, neither up nor down.
Okay, so sort of a state of stasis, if you like, not.
To keep it exactly where it is. To me, it's a dictionary meaning.
Okay, so to keep it, so in relationship to business or environment, is that you know, most business people would suggest that there has to be a certain level of growth in a market economy, that we have to keep moving forward. So it's a very difficult thing to do.
I can't say the word. Just to keep it the same, or the sustainability. The dictionary says to keep it the same, and I know, or I'm pretty sure, that's not what you mean by using the word. You want to make it better.
Sure. I mean, I guess if we wanted it in terms of sustainability generally, in whatever area we're at, we have to ask, are we happy with the way it is right now, right? If we're going to sustain, do we want to sustain things exactly the way they are now, right? Other suggestions?
To me, sustainability means being able to balance economic as well as the planet, as well as health and well-being. You have to be able to strike a balance between not crippling our country and the world to make the world a better place, but not destroying nature for our own gains.
Sure. So I mean, when we could look at things, we can look at large kind of global issues, right? And that you sort of allude to is that, you know, are we happy with the way things are right now? Whether that's our own kind of social or environmental place in the world or that of others, you know, in sort of a global world. At the same time, we have a market economy, right? And we do have to recognize that a lot of the problems that we've had maybe have been caused by business, but at the same time, business is definitely integrated into part of the solutions and part of the way that we live, right? We can't divorce ourselves from the business opportunities and responsibilities that come along with that market economy. Right? For me, one of the things that I like to, this is the definition, the sort of top piece there that I don't know, suits my sort of perspective of sustainability, and it may resonate with you. And it's that notion that we have this long-term maintenance, and that sort of aligns with what your suggestion was around stability, of having this stable, sustainable kind of maintenance of systems, and that we have three particular systems, if you like, that we're concerned with, and that's the environmental system, the social system, and the economic system. And the reason that I really encourage you to think about it in this way is that if you think about it as this interconnected series of systems, then perhaps you begin to appreciate that the activities in one area and one system will almost certainly impact the activities and interests and elements of the other systems within the sort of global environment. So we look specifically at that notion of economic and social environmental, and the notion that system maintenance means that we want to be able to ensure that, as you pointed out, the actions that that are occurring today are not going to diminish our ability to maintain the positive maintenance of all of the systems that we have in the future. And you know, there are lots and lots of systems. We picked those three: environmental, economic, and social. But you can see within that, I mean, we have all sorts of subsystems, right? There's all sorts of interconnected pieces that can be examples of an economic system, a social system, and an ecological system. And the key that I really want you to take away from this is that even on the slide that I've put up there, they're sort of in these silos. You're looking at these as, oh, there's a list here of subsystems in an economic system, and there's a list over here, and we often look at them in isolation. We look at just that one little place, rather than looking, in business we use the term triple bottom line a lot, but looking at that interconnectedness of them. And really, that's an important aspect here. As you move forward, all of these things that we view as positives and of negatives in our world tend to be interconnected. You know, they're not divorced from each other. And so as we try to maybe repair or fix, in business we're always very surgical with our analysis of something. We try to fix that specific problem, and we don't sometimes step back and go, okay, if we try to attack or move into this area, what is going to be the impact on these other kinds of areas? And not to say we can always predict it, but we need to be aware, at least, that there are going to be ripple effects throughout multiple systems when things happen in the economy or in the business world that affect other areas, just as happens the other way around, right? They're not divorced from each other. And you know, this is Thomas Friedman's an interesting author. This is a book that's a few years old now, but it's, again, this notion that even seemingly small activities that we take place or take for granted every day, right? Having some French fries, buying a pair of shoes at Costco, you know, having a cup of coffee at Starbucks. All of these things now have that one act of perhaps commerce from us has an effect on all sorts of other systems, whether they happen to be here locally or globally. Right? So let's kind of look a little bit closer and say, well, how are these systems holding up? Right? If we look at the economic, the social, and the environmental, how are we doing on all those fronts? Right? And this is a picture of, does anybody recognize where this is from? Is anybody? Yeah?
South Africa.
This is from, yeah, it's from South Africa. It's from a shanty town, an area called Soweto, which is outside of Johannesburg and Pretoria. It's largely a black community. There's about 900,000, about 3 times the size of Greater Victoria in terms of population. And it's a growing area of South Africa, of the sort of Johannesburg area, right? And not all of Soweto looks like this. They have high rises, they have other areas, but this is not uncommon. It's not an uncommon scene that you see here. And I put this up, not so much to draw an attention to South Africa, but to draw an attention to the fact that the UN has suggested, and this was in a study in 2006, that at the time, about 1/6 of the world's population live in shanty towns. So at the time, we're bigger now, the time it was more than 1 billion people, and it's growing, not shrinking in terms of the numbers that live in, certainly a different way than we are accustomed to in most of Canada. Right? This is Mumbai. And there are 5 major slums in Mumbai. This is the Darvali slum. And again, it's interesting. The Times of India 2 years ago suggested that in Mumbai, about 78% of all the population of Mumbai live in the slums. And again, it's not to say that there's not a rich culture and group of people that live there. There's what we would call all manner of social class have lived and grown up in the slums. But the fact of the economic reality of Mumbai and that area, real estate is very expensive, and so people make a choice to live in a more modest mean because they can provide for their family better. You look in certain areas of Mumbai, it's among the highest real estate values in the world. And you wouldn't necessarily think about that connected to India, but India is a growing economic base, right? And if you look at this, compare it with this. Is anybody familiar with this picture? Or this house? This is also in Mumbai. Okay? I love it when houses have names, and this one's named Antilia. Right? It's owned by Mukesh Ambani. He's a tycoon, an Indian businessman. It's home to him, or one of the homes he has for him and his family. You can see some people standing here on one of the balconies. He has 2 helicopter pads that are built into what is a multi-story home. And does anybody know its sort of claim to fame, besides being a very palatial place? It's pretty big, right? I mean, you don't get even the scale here, but when you see it in real life, it's quite striking. It is the most expensive home in the world, valued at more than $1 billion US. Okay? So, in the same economic area, you have 78% of the people living in slums, and yet you have juxtaposed that against the most expensive home in the world. And it speaks to that sort of economic disparity, if you like, that can happen within one area, let alone globally when we compare country to country. And, lest you think that Canada is some community that is immune from the kinds of issues that occur in other places in the country. Certainly, we have our own share of social issues that we have to, well, I would think that we would want to address, right? And in fact, the UN last year called out Canada specifically addressing the poverty of children in Canada.
Specifically Native children.
Correct, right? And so, it's an interesting, we have a lot of wealth here in Canada, so we have to sort of maybe ask ourselves how well we're doing in terms of that distribution of wealth or opportunity moving forward. So, if we turn our attention to environmental systems away from social systems, this picture is of what?
Beetle kill?
Yeah, it was interesting when I was doing some work in the interior. There was this is a few years back. There was truck after truck after truck of logs going by, and they referred to it as bugwood. So, there's more bugwood going down the highway now, right? And this particular picture is taken along the Crow's Nest Highway as you sort of head towards by Princeton, coming down through that area. And it's largely caused by what? So these are dead pine trees for the most part. Yeah, the pine beetle, right? The mountain pine beetle. And what's the issue with the pine beetle? Right. So we're in this situation right now where we've had warmer winters than would normally have been expected certainly in the interior. And it hasn't been enough to kill the bug off. There's a sustained, I'm not a scientist, I can't remember the exact amount, temperature drop and length of time that would normally have kept the pine beetle in balance.
Minus 30, 2 weeks.
So minus 30 for 2 weeks. That hasn't occurred for a very long time here. And so it's allowed that particular beetle to thrive. And the impact has been on, it's been quite devastating on pine in particular. But now there's others. I have a friend that runs a woodlot, and he's going, well, mountain pine beetle is only one of the issues that they're dealing with in terms of like sort of biological threats to the system. Right?
Another problem with the pine beetle is because we don't allow forest fires anymore. We promote forest fires also controlled.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the challenge is, and they tried to do that in Yellowstone about 10 years ago to let natural cause, but it's difficult to do. It ended up being a wildfire that destroyed a lot of Yellowstone at the time, and it's recovering now in a different way than it used to be. So you're right, management, there's a lot of balances, right, of managing the forest system. So this particular slide is from the Arctic. The U.S. climate. What am I trying to say here? The Climatic Data Center indicated that 2012 was the most extreme weather that they'd recorded in 102 years. We've gone to a point now where there's actually globally people are talking about making the Northwest Passage a viable transport route for the first time in history. In 2007 was the first time that the Northwest Passage was essentially open for navigation unrestricted for a period of time. You could actually sail around up there and not run into the pack ice. And it's interesting at the same time, if you remember back, you may not be too young to remember, but at one point the government announced that they were going to build a Polar 8 icebreaker. The sort of the largest and biggest, can crush through ice and serve our interests in the Arctic. And over time that kind of got scaled down. It's like that one was off the table. They're still actually talking about it. It's in this latest round of procurements that C-SPAN is going to work on, is building a less of an icebreaker. The Polar 8 is sort of off the table. And you sort of think, well, why? Why is this going to happen? And I think part of it is the fact that we just don't need an icebreaker that's that big anymore. We need a slush breaker. We need to get through there and just kind of make it up to all the different areas in a more economically friendly way, I guess. This picture here, Has anybody heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? Got a few. So what is it besides the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? The size and scale of that, is anybody? Yeah, about twice that right now. There's actually a bunch of them, and it's called the Pacific Gyre. And this has nothing to do with the tsunami in Japan, and this has been existing for a long time. But it's sort of the weather patterns, the currents in the Pacific tend to gather up garbage, in particular plastic. And it's now an area that's estimated to be twice the size, a little bit larger now than twice the size of Texas, the main garbage patch. And so you sort of look at this and you think, well, why? You know, I mean, how is this really good for what have we done to that area of the environment, or is there anything we can do to repair it, right?
Scientists believe the world's largest garbage dump isn't on land, it's in the Pacific Ocean. Estimated to be twice the size of Texas, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch stretches from the coast of California all the way to Japan. In some places, the man-made debris is 90 feet deep. Marine biologists estimate that 90% of the 3.5 million tons of floating trash is all plastic. In some parts of the ocean, there's already 6 times more plastic than plankton, which is the food many fish rely on to survive. How did all that plastic end up in the ocean? 80% is litter from land, either dropped directly into waterways or blown by wind into rivers and streams from states as far away as Iowa. The monumental amount of plastic trash has created an ecological disaster that has cost the lives of millions of seabirds and marine mammals. When this dead albatross was cut open, its stomach was full, not of fish, but of plastic, including a cigarette lighter. And this turtle, caught in a plastic ring when it was young, managed to survive until adulthood.
So there are many examples of these kinds of issues. There's other, again, areas that we don't see day to day, like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and that doesn't mean they don't exist. Let's look a bit more, let's flip over to more about the economic systems. How are we doing economically right now? It was interesting, if you remember back to 2007, we had sort of the financial crisis that it was still sort of is looming today. We had the problems with the debt crisis then, and the overextension of credit, the mortgage crisis that happened in 2007 and sort of sent North America into a tailspin. And that then morphed into problems in the Eurozone. And there was a debt crisis in the Eurozone that still exists to this day. We have situations with Greece, or whether it's with Portugal, or whether it's with Italy, where, for a lot of reasons, particularly the cheap availability of money and the ability of governments to borrow that money, got themselves into trouble. Right? It was interesting. I was reading today. Does anybody know what it was just announced today that if we look at present time, the unemployment rate in Canada dipped to 6.9% last month. It's the lowest level it's been since I think 2007. Right? So that's a good thing, right? You look at that and you say, well, we've dipped down a couple of percent, but in the same breath, does anybody know what they attributed the not large, but the dip down to 6.9%? To school. Maybe people in this room have decided to stop looking for work. And when you stop looking for work, you're not counted as unemployed. And so perhaps you've come back to, people have come back to school and have removed themselves from the actively seeking work. Of the people coming back, it's actually at the same time they claimed there was 11,000 full-time jobs that were added to the economy last month. But there's been a great number most of our gains have been in part-time employment as well. At the same time, C by C World Markets yesterday released a report on Canada that said that about 50% of businesses have projected growth for the next year. And that's the best, 50% of businesses have projected growth. That's the best rate we've had in almost 5 years. At the same time, a greater percentage said they saw no prospect that they were going to add jobs into their business, which is the worst outlook for job growth in business since 2008. So we're clearly in this mixed kind of turmoil economically, even here in Canada and the States. If you remember back a year ago, Ben Bernanke of the Federal Reserve in the States coined this new term, Fiscal Cliff. Right? We haven't really heard about that before. And that was 12 months ago, and in fact, I was speaking to this group just at the time that that occurred. Well, does anybody, what's happening in the States right now? Is it all wine and roses? No. 800,000 people in the States right now are government workers are laid off. And we have a new fiscal cliff that's looming when?
Did they actually come to an agreement? They were supposed to come to one last night. It was the new options, but I never heard about it.
They haven't yet. So that cliff looms, I think, on the 15th, is it,
Yeah.
Tim? I think it's coming up. So it's still around today, right? We have the same kinds of issues.
Democrats and Republicans both insist it is up to the other to end Washington's political stalemate. President Barack Obama says congressional Republicans must allow a vote on a no-strings funding bill.
Stop this farce. End this shutdown now.
Republicans say the standoff stems from President Obama's refusal to negotiate while the government remains closed. House Majority Leader Eric Cantor.
That is not leadership. It is that attitude, that unwillingness to sit down and talk to us that has brought about this shutdown.
President Obama likens Republican demands to those of hostage takers.
That's why I won't pay a ransom in exchange for reopening the government. And I certainly won't pay a ransom in exchange for raising the debt ceiling.
Frustrations have reached a boiling point. House Speaker John Boehner.
Well, this isn't some damn game. The American people don't want their government shut down, and neither do I.
Saturday, the House of Representatives voted to retroactively pay all federal workers once the shutdown ends. But government employees do not know when paychecks will resume, prompting demands for congressional action.
I have a family to take care of, and it's real to me, and you're affecting me, and it's hard.
The shutdown impasse could be overshadowed by another looming fiscal crisis, the need to raise the federal borrowing limit. The United States risks a debt default and a credit downgrade unless Congress agrees to raise the debt ceiling by the end of next week. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
So, of course, as I'm sure we're all acutely aware, you know, if the U.S. sneezes, we're the ones that get the cold. So, you know, we're in a global world now, in an interconnected set of systems. The things that happen in the States, or happen for that matter in Europe or Asia, absolutely affect our ability to maintain our economy and to maintain our social and environmental systems as well. Right? And this is kind of the rub. Right now we've got a lot of turmoil. We have some systems that seem to be out of whack or out of sync, but at the same time we have growing economies around the world. It's not all completely sort of unstable. There's sort of winners and losers in every kind of economic battle. And when we look at this, how many people live on this planet right now?
All of us.
We do, and that number would be, it's more than a few billion, right? We just surpassed 7 billion last year by the closest count we've got. So that's a lot of people on the planet, right? Of those people, how many of them live in North America and say Canada, Mexico, the States? You know, if we had to give a percentage roughly, I mean, we don't have to be perfect here.
Somewhere just over 400 million, or I know Canada's about 30 million, the States is 350.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Mexico is.
So if we conservatively said, say, 5% of the world's population, right, we'd be probably in the ballpark, right? We might be out by 1% or 2%, but not much. So we're sitting right now at 7 billion, and 5% or thereabouts live kind of in this area around us. Of the resources that are being consumed, what percentage does that 5% currently consume, whether directly in our ground or through the things that we buy and we buy from other countries? Is it 5%?
No, it's probably closer to 50.
I think it's like 20 or 30%.
Yeah, it's about, give or take, depending on the resource, about 25%. So we have 5% of the population consuming somewhere around 25% of the resources. Where are the growing economies of the world? If you had to pick one or two, what would they be?
The BRIC countries.
The BRIC countries, which are?
Brazil, Russia, India, and China.
Okay, so we have this group of countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, being the ones that are probably the easiest to recognize, that have far faster growing economies than ours. Close to double digits in all of those countries, if not over. I mean, it sort of oscillates on either side of 10% right now. Well, with that economic prosperity in those countries comes a burgeoning middle class. Right? And with that middle class often comes more consumerism, more things that are purchased. Right? And so the rub is not only the fact that we've kind of consumed in a certain way and have set up a pattern, it's that we run the risk, when I say we globally, of repeating those same things in other parts of the world. And it's not for us to say that, the middle class of China can't have, if they choose to, what we have.
But we are. We are. We're telling China not to use coal power plants, even though America still runs off of coal power plants.
But China themselves recognizes the problem. Yeah. China themselves has gone from investing almost nothing in green technology to $5 billion a year in green technology. They are the single largest clean tech investor now, because they realize that over time their own economy can't survive that. So they're in this kind of thing, and yes, we can tell them to do that, but we really don't have the clout.
That's also partly due to the very much increasing desert that is coming out of Western China.
Yeah.
Growing farther and farther.
Agreed, right? Agreed. I wouldn't deny it. But we've got this situation where we have a rising population and a rising middle class, right? For whatever reason, then we're going to have that. And it's incumbent upon all of us to sort of figure out the ways that we can try to restore things back into balance, right? When you look at areas like, I say, world consumption, and these are quite old statistics, and we're talking about mid-2000s in terms of the number of cars and autos, and it's just an illustration of the economic middle class that's occurring in China and the prosperity of a class of people that's moving forward. And these are, they affect everyone in terms of our ability to predict what the future of the planet and on our own economic and social and environmental place is going to be. Right? And so I guess I've tried to make a case that the world is a set of interconnected systems, and yet we're not necessarily, those systems aren't in the best of health, regardless of what they are. And I don't want to be, I feel like I usually say I feel like the Debbie Downer of the world here, getting all the gloom and doom that comes, along with these kinds of statistics or this sort of worldview. But, there's no question that we have issues in the world. But I think it's important to recognize that, we need to make changes. And with those kind of challenges comes creativity. And with that creativity comes innovation. And with that innovation becomes business opportunities. So there are ways, there are methods that we can use and things to kind of lift ourselves out. And those things are happening now. They might be small, in terms of their global perspective, but they are real in terms of what occurs, right? And to give you an example of that, this building is Eastgate Center. It's in Zimbabwe. It's the largest retail center in the country, retail and office space in the country. And one of the sort of innovative areas of sustainability is around biomimicry. So it's taking that notion that, you know what, the world actually, or the nature can actually help us figure out some of the problems that we've got ourselves into if we actually take the time to look and watch. And the architect of this building used the principles of ventilation that are associated with termites and termite mounds in the country. He looked at these and he said, you know, the termites are very efficient around regulating the temperature of their termite mound. And could I apply that same principle to a building? And he was able to design a building that actually has no conventional heating or air conditioning system in it. It uses a system of venting that collects and vents hot air whenever it's required. And this is through, obviously, the construction of the building, the materials that were used, the orientation of the building. The result of that is that this is a massively big complex. It uses 90% less energy on heating and cooling than a conventional building would be. It uses only 10% of similar energy. And so there is a great benefit to, in so many ways, environmentally to that. But one of the other spins of that is because they're so efficient in terms of their in terms of a cost that's associated with heating or cooling the building, they're able to pass that savings on to the people that actually rent space in the building. And typically, the rents in this facility, which is the largest, it automatically attracts a lot of economic business, are 20% lower because the heating is 90% lower. So there's an economic benefit as well as a social and a environmental benefit to this kind of system. Right? And there are examples closer to home. I mean, people have heard perhaps of level ground trading and small businesses that are doing things to elicit change and to try to address some of the issues that we've got. Yeah?
Would it have cost more to make that building compared to a traditional building?
No, it was actually, it wasn't. It was considerably cheaper in terms of the equipment and the design. And the other thing was that they really reflected, when they were building it, to use traditional kinds of, or very local kinds of masonry products that were well suited to that environment. So there was actually a great economic boost in the construction of it during the construction phase as well. So it was cheaper to build as well in this case. Right? So closer to home, we can look at specific examples, and I really want to leave you with one final video and then one wrap-up slide. And this, I'll just let it run here and you can watch.
I'd like to welcome you all to South's traditional territory. What we are doing is something that I believe we all should be doing. And then we all should take care of Mother Earth before we can assure a healthy community. And then if we do that, Mother Earth will be able to provide for us for our future generations.
Sue spent a lot of time preparing a collective vision, a picture in which everyone could see themselves. The community came up with a sort of umbrella project, if you like, of how does this community become sustainable. And we knew we wanted to be autonomous in power. We wanted to be self-sufficient in food. We wanted to be able to create training and economic prosperity, all the while integrating that into the culture and the values.
It's very important to integrate culture because we are First Nation. If we lose that, then we become just another group of people in our nation, and we are distinct, and we very much need to hold on to our culture.
So we started with the solar project, and that incorporates the photovoltaic, and the beauty of it is it just sits in the sun for the next 70, 100 years, creating electricity and creating money for the band. So all our bills are credits. Many of the houses have solar thermal panels on the roof. So this is to enable the community members to have highly reduced bills. Whenever we run these projects, we always incorporate training and opportunities for jobs.
I took the solar training here at Soup Nation to become a certified solar installer. I work in solar thermal, which differs from photovoltaic, which produces electricity. Solar thermal produces your hot water needs. It's a supplement to your domestic hot water tank.
So if you count the solar hot water and the photovoltaics, Soup Nation is the most solar intensive community in Canada. Not just First Nations, but any community in Canada.
The garden program came from a vision in 2009. We wanted to grow enough food to keep the community sustainable. We use all the food from the garden. We use all the food that our members hunt. We use fish that our members catch. It's all sustainable through our membership.
Having food security means we don't have to go very far for our food, and that's the way our old people always told us. Your food's right here.
We need harmony, we need peace, we need respect. And with all that, that means looking after Mother Earth and our children.
Anyway, I think it's important to understand that, you know, it's easy to look at problems and say there is really no solution here. These are too big to tackle. And yet if we start to look inwardly and look at our own actions and those around our community, then they do have not only a community, sort of a regional impact, but they can have a global impact as well as we move forward. I'm really a capitalist at heart. I believe in a market economy. I believe that the issues and challenges that we're facing are going to be solved through a cooperative business model. Doesn't mean there's not some new thinking that has to take place, but it is going to have a, you know, there is going to be a business solution to this. Part of, you know, a lot of people talk about the area that we're moving into now, or the time frame we're moving into, is the sixth wave, right? And it's this notion that where we've been dealing with economies lately that have been around biotechnology and digital economy, that the sustainability economy and the whole notion of that sustainable piece is going to really be where business and energies need to get focused in order to move forward. And you know, I think it's going to move forward on two fronts. One is dealing with, we'll call it the legacy that we've created around us, and trying to resolve the issues that happen there, but a lot of it's going to deal with the innovations of moving forward. Companies like Carmana Technologies and others that are local here that are saying, we've got a better way to do this, and we just need to interconnect, you know, stop making the mistakes that we've made in the past and fix that piece. We have now things around energy and uses that can reduce energy by up to 80 or 90%. Wind power by itself is not going to be the answer, or though solar power, but it can be part of a solution if it's integrated with new technology. And once we try to fix things moving forward, there's opportunity there, and then there'll be opportunity to look to the past and try to repair and get restorative around some of the legacy that we've created over the last 100 years, and balance both of those things out. But both of them come with opportunity. Anyway, thank you so much. I've kept you 3 minutes too long here, but if you have some questions for me, I'll be happy, and I encourage you to consider Biz 261, which is Business and Sustainability, one of your electives. So if you have a question, I'll be around for a few minutes afterwards. Thanks very much.